This lesson will cover strategies for teaching individuals with intellectual disabilities. At the end of this lesson, you will also complete an activity called a task analysis. When you are finished, please remember to submit it under the assignment link in ReggieNet. Students with intellectual disabilities have not typically been included in the general education setting on a global basis. More typically, they are placed in self-contained classrooms and may have minimal access to the general education setting. However, research has proved that students with intellectual disabilities and other disabilities experience higher academic achievement and greater social gains when they are included in the general education setting. Much of this has to do with exposure to the general education curriculum, higher expectations, and involvement in more social activities. While it may be difficult to find ways to meet the needs of individuals with intellectual disabilities in the general education setting, new models and designs have really provided a pathway for allowing greater access and opportunities within the general education setting. These models include universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. UDL principles can be found underlying other models such as RTI and PBIS. As we talked about earlier in the semester, UDL is a set of principles for curriculum development that give all students equal opportunities to learn. UDL provides a blueprint for creating instructional goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone. Not a single one-size-fits-all approach, but rather flexible approaches that can be customized and adjusted for individual needs. The guiding principles of UDL include providing multiple means of presentation, providing multiple means of action and expression, providing multiple means of engagement. In other words, differentiating the way we represent learning, allows students to express their knowledge, and allows students to engage in the learning environment. This model promotes an access by all, or inclusion approach. Essentially, UDL holds that we should and can educate all children in the general education setting. However, it is important to understand that while inclusion is the goal, there is a need for the Continuum of Placements model. It may not always be appropriate for students to be educated in the general education setting.
In many classrooms, the focus is on an illusory average student. Many curricula are designed for that student. Cognitive neuroscience has shown us that there really isn't an average student anywhere, and that's why it's an illusory student. Universal design for learning, though, is particularly focused on making sure that we get those students who have been marginalized, for whom that designing for the average student has never worked well. And that certainly means students who have been struggling, students for whom English is not their first language, students with disabilities. They've been typically marginalized by this illusory average curriculum. Secondly, though, students at the other margins, the students who are called gifted and talented, are also students who've been underserved by this mainstream curriculum. They haven't been challenged. They're bored. They're underserved as well. UDL is a framework based in cognitive neurosciences for designing learning experiences that work across a wide spectrum of learners. Its main purpose is to make sure that everybody is a successful learner and reaches what we call being an expert learner. That is, they know a lot, they know how to do a lot, and they love learning and want to do it more. The key to universal design for learning is that we're designing learning experiences which from the beginning are designed to be universal and to make sure everybody learns. And that design is primarily based on the power to be very flexible in allowing choices, in allowing different paths, in allowing for things to be presented in different ways so that we reach those other two things, universal and everybody learns. The three principles of universal design for learning come from careful analysis of what learning really is, and particularly the research that has been done by thousands of other researchers in cognitive science, cognitive neuroscience, neuropsychology, which have carefully looked at what comprises learning. How does learning really work? And what are its differences among individual learners? From that work, we've abstracted out 3 simple principles that are involved in any learning situation. How does the learner pick up information? How do they express and act on that information? And how are they engaged by the learning situation? There are 3 broad principles. The first has to do with how we present information to the learner. And we talk about multiple means of representation. As it turns out, there's no one way that we can present information so to be successful for everyone to learn it. So we talk about multiple means of representation. So in UDL, we talk about providing multiple representations so that we're sure everyone will be able to make sense of the symbols, the language, the drawings, and so on. Take, for example, in teaching mathematics, it's typically very strong to use multiple representations, not just the symbolic expression of the numbers, but manipulables, things that the children can operate on and see directly and perceptually rather than their symbolic form. So that's a great example of providing multiple representation, both the symbolic number and a physical manipulative. The second principle is provide multiple means of action and expression. And that takes into account the fact that students vary greatly in how they express what they know, how they can act skillfully, how they can communicate in language or in drawing and so on. And students differ widely, so we say we must provide multiple means of expression over the course of our teaching and learning. The third principle is multiple means of engagement. And in many ways, it's the most important principle. If we don't engage students in learning, don't make it important to them, make them motivated for it, then none of the other forms of representation or expression will be that important. Within Universal Design for Learning, when we look at a curriculum, we think of 4 main components, and each of them need to be universally designed. The first component is, what are its goals? How do we translate standards into things that are important to do in the classroom? Secondly, what are the materials that are going to be in that classroom? Everything from a chalkboard to a textbook to a workbook to something on the wall. Are these materials key to learning? And if so, are they universally designed for learning? Third, the methods. How does the teacher go about teaching when she or he is working at helping students learn? Does she set up collaborative groups? Does she lecture? Does she provide experiences out in the world? And lastly, and very important to Universal Design for Learning, is the means of assessment. How are we sure that learning really occurs? When we began our work, we, like most people, were focused on learners who were doing poorly, who looked like they had disabilities. Over time, we began to change our focus because we could see when we were in classrooms that the classrooms were in fact disabling, that they were not designed properly to ensure that every child would succeed. And we began more and more to see that the curriculum itself was disabled, and that the work of the Universal Design for Learning guidelines is to reduce the disabilities in the curriculum itself so that more students succeed, more students have optimum challenges, and come out as expert learners in the end.
We talked earlier in the course about the cascade of services approach to special education. In this approach, there are different placements for children depending on their needs. And this philosophy towards providing special education is that you provide a continuum of placements. The way the cascade was envisioned was that most of the children would be educated in a regular classroom. For children with intellectual disability, the placement pattern hasn't worked out the way the cascade was envisioned. As you can see from this graph, almost half of the children with intellectual disability are educated in the separate special education classroom. Only 16% spend their whole day in the general education setting, while a little over 25% are educated in a resource room model where they spend more than half their day in a general education classroom but are pulled out for less than half the day. You can see that still not an insignificant number, 6%, are educated in a separate school, so a totally different school for kids with intellectual disability. Actually, Illinois still has a lot of these schools. In general, having a special school just for kids with intellectual disability is not perceived to be a real progressive form of service delivery. But the tradition in Illinois remains, and many of these schools were built 30 or so years ago, and for whatever reason, school districts have decided to maintain them. One of the ways we can provide access to the general education setting, along with principles of UDL, is through the supports paradigm. This paradigm holds that there is a mismatch between the environment and the individual's level of functioning that can be bridged through offering supports. Supports in this paradigm are the resources and strategies put in place to enhance human functioning. Support needs are then the psychological construct referring to the pattern and intensity of supports needed in order for the individual to participate in activities associated with normative human functioning. Essentially, the supports paradigm offers a way to enhance access to more typical settings and activities through the use of supports. It is important to understand that we all need supports. We use supports for getting to school and work on time, remembering important dates, finishing important tasks, and so forth. The supports paradigm extends this by looking at the frequency and intensity of supports needed in an effort to bridge the gap between the person and the environment. Regardless of the philosophy regarding UDL and inclusion versus continuum of placement, basic academic skills, functional academics, independent living, and self-determination and advocacy skills may need to be taught. There are a number of teaching methods and strategies that have proven helpful when working with students with intellectual disabilities. While there are many strategies and methods for working with individuals with ID, here are a few important ones discussed throughout literature in the field. Self-directed learning model of instruction, cooperative learning, functional curriculum, and assistive technology. Students with intellectual disabilities often face difficulties with motivation and leading a self-guided life. They, at times, may over-rely on others for guidance and direction rather than making their own decisions. One strategy that builds on the concept of self-determination is a self-determined learning model of instruction, or SDLMI. The self-determined learning model of instruction is an instructional model that teaches students to engage in self-regulated and self-directed learning. The SDLMI, which is based on component elements of self-determined behavior, such as goal setting, problem solving, and decision-making, assists with curriculum augmentation for students with disabilities and helps students to promote self-determination and access the general curriculum. This model involves 3 phases that encompass the questions, what is my goal? What is my plan? And what have I learned? Each phase also represents or aligns with the typical problem-solving process. Each phase consists of a series of 4 student questions to direct them through a problem-solving sequence that differ from phase to phase, but stand for identical steps in each phase. Identify the problem, identify potential solutions to the problem, identify barriers to solving the problem, and identify consequences of each solution. And each question is linked to teacher objectives. Each instructional phase question provides educational support that teachers can use in teaching students to self-direct their learning. Peer tutoring is an evidence-based practice that promotes academic achievement and social or communication gains and has benefits for students without disabilities. Peer tutoring involves pairing students one-on-one with a student who has solid skills in the area being taught with a student who has not yet mastered the skills. This strategy is based on flexible delivery, which understands that students have different strengths and weaknesses and therefore will have opportunities to act as the tutor or to be tutored. Peer tutoring along with SDLMI are great strategies to use when including students with ID in the general education setting.
What is peer tutoring?
Peer tutoring refers to a variety of ways in which learning takes place through interactions with peers.
There are two types of peer tutors, cross-grades and same age. Cross-grade tutors are when older children tutor younger children, and same-age tutors is when the tutor is the same age as a tutee.
Peer tutors can be used across all academic subjects, language arts, math, social studies, and science, and across various grade levels.
Implementing peer tutors in the classroom.
Recruit peer tutors. Obtain permission as both sets of parents and principals. Communication techniques, students to student. Different reinforcement techniques. Fifth, skill analysis and skill training for the tutor.
As a teacher, what steps can you take?
Steps. Create task criteria sheets. Model how to peer tutor. Practice, observe, debrief skills, and task criteria sheets.
Who can be involved in peer tutoring?
All students can be involved. Tutors are chosen based on the teacher's belief that they are able to take a tutor role on. The tutee may be a child with a learning disability, developmental disability, ELL, ESL, or an at-risk student.
What are the benefits of peer tutoring? Assist students academically. They are able to learn from and through their peers. Provide students with developmental skills. Allow students to acquire teaching, behaviors, and leadership roles. Promotes an inclusive classroom, and most importantly, encourages positive social interactions among students.
How are positive social interactions created?
Peer tutoring promotes social interaction between the tutor and the tutee. These relationships are created among diverse groups of students in the classroom, creates new understandings of social skills for both the tutor and the tutee. Students become more self-aware. They are better able to understand the thoughts and feelings of others.
What does research say?
Erickson's psychosocial theory. It emphasized the psychological development through the person's interactions with his social environment.
Effects of peer tutoring on young children's social interactions. This study explored the effects of peer tutoring on children's social interactions and compared social interaction behaviors between children who are English language learners, ELL, and children who are primary English learners, PES. From this study, the participants involved included 7 ELL and 7 PES students from 2 primary grade classrooms. The ages of the participants range from 6 to 8 years old. The results: the class-wide peer tutoring was effective for both the ELL and PES groups of students by increasing and improving their social behaviors in the classroom.
Assistive technology is another useful strategy to use when working with students with ID in the general education and special education setting. Assistive technology has many benefits, a few of which are independence, productivity, self-reliance, and self-determination. AT works well for students with ID because it removes barriers and assists in adapting curriculum. For example, using video presentation of information rather than print presentation, using spell checker software, and using text-to-speech or speech-to-text software. AT used to adapt curriculum may include pacing, level of difficulty, amount of practice, and feedback options. Oftentimes, educational software settings can be modified, or software can be used to modify the curriculum.
The first thing that people say is, What is AT? Well, there are many ways to answer that question. You could say it stands for Assistive Technology, that is, technology that assists you in some way. If you have a disability, you may need assistance with any number of things, from someone who needs an easier way to open a door, to someone who can only move their eyes and needs a more comprehensive solution. We like to sum up AT as returning independence through technology. Because everyone's needs are different, the assistance they require is also different. AT can help in many areas. The main ones are ACE, access, communication and entertainment. Some people find it difficult or impossible to get to and answer the door. Imagine being confined to the chair in your living room and the doorbell rings. What would you do? AT has solutions for that. Some people have limited dexterity, so using small buttons on telephones and computers can be a challenge, or they might not be able to speak. Now imagine you need to contact a family member. What would you do? AT has solutions for that. Imagine you are confined to your bed, but at least you have the television on. Then, that programme you really want to watch is on the other channel, or you now want to listen to some music. You can't reach, or are unable to operate the remotes. What would you do? AT has solutions for that too. AT can benefit many individuals. By reducing the reliance on care, it can return greater independence. It can increase security and improve social lives. It delivers peace of mind not only to those using it, but to their family and friends, colleagues and caregivers. It improves quality of life. RSL Steeper bring over 30 years of experience in crafting bespoke assistive technology solutions, installing and supporting them. We understand that everyone has individual needs and there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. We begin by assessing and discussing the needs of the individual and producing a bespoke AT package that will work for you. We can draw on a large catalogue of devices and equipment that can come together in many ways to provide individual solutions. Our fully scalable systems offer full flexibility. There is no job too big or small. We will then arrange and deliver a high-quality installation with one of our own friendly technicians at a time to suit you. We then see that the system is properly maintained with a programme of ongoing aftercare and support. Our experience with each part of the process from assessment to aftercare means you will have a valuable partner with you every step of the way. Your goal becomes our goal. If you think some things in life should just be easier, we may just have the answer. Imagine. It's a warm day and you need to open the windows, but you can't do it yourself and there isn't anyone else around. You have no option but to become hotter and hotter. We can install an AT device where you can open your windows without any effort or difficulty, without having to move from your seat. If you have any difficulty getting up and answering your door, you may feel that you need to leave it unlocked, just in case. Our AT solution will allow you to first see and talk to the person at the door, and then if you want to, unlock and open the door for you, a much more secure option. If you have difficulty operating a telephone, you may therefore be unable to chat with friends and family, or call anyone in an emergency. Similarly, they can't call you. There is an AT solution that can help and return your social life and independence. Entertainment is essential. If you need to control the TV in any way, DVD player, hi-fi, iPod dock, almost any entertainment device, our AT devices can help you with all of this. Simply select what you want on, which channel, which song or album, how loud, or turn it all off. AT can help improve so many people's lives and return their independence. RSL Steeper, improving people's lives. This is what AT really is.
Functional academics and curriculum are another strategy for working with students with ID. Functional academics focus on teaching students the everyday skills that are essential for the student presently and in the future. While we may want to teach the range of curriculum to all students, it may be important to focus on the essential skills that are immediately useful or functional for students with ID because of educational implications. Functional curriculums are essentially alternative curriculums that may replace the more traditional curriculum used in schools. The goal is to teach students the skills they need to function competently according to their age and environment. Functional curriculums emphasize vocational, living, communication, and social skills. Functional curriculums are also very clear and concise with multiple opportunities to practice and generalize skills. Like we discussed in the previous slide, a functional curriculum is curriculum that focuses on highly structured and individualized instruction of life skills. Part of that includes breaking these skills into smaller and more manageable steps in order to teach such skills. This is called task analysis. Task analysis is one strategy that we can use when working with individuals with ID. However, this is a strategy that will work with all students. Let's take a look at the following video, which provides a brief overview of task analysis and some examples.
Chaining is another strategy that is often used to teach complex skills that involve a sequence of behaviors. Chaining involves breaking a larger skill down into its step-by-step components. Each step is taught and mastered, and then chained together into a larger whole. The description of the larger skill broken down into its sequence of steps is called a task analysis. Task analysis involves breaking a complex skill into smaller, teachable units, the products of which is a series of sequentially ordered steps or tasks. For example, take algebra. If you look at it as a whole, it looks daunting. However, if you break it down into its simplest parts, you may think, I can do this.
Okay, if you just take this and break it down into a couple of easy steps.
Bobby is overwhelmed with all the steps involved in tying his shoes. Bobby's older brother knows how to do it, and with chaining, he can teach Bobby to tie his shoes independently by taking the whole task and breaking it down into steps. First, he crosses the laces, slips one under and pulls, then makes a loop, takes the other string and brings it around the loop, then pulls the string through the hole and pulls. As you can see, our task analysis of shoelace tying consists of a lot of steps. All of these steps need to be taught in order to achieve the final goal. But the task analysis of Bobby's brother may look different from another's task analysis. It's okay. You break down the skill into as many steps needed for the student to learn. Some steps can be chunked together for some students, and some students need skills broken down into very small steps. In this clip, we see David's therapist using backwards chaining to teach him to receptively identify 3 pictures. In the first trial, David is prompted to give lettuce and guitar, but independently gives the fire truck.
The guitar and the fire truck. Lettuce, guitar, fire truck. You got it. Okay.
In the second trial, he is only prompted to find the lettuce and independently finds the guitar and fire truck.
Give me the lettuce, the guitar, and the fire truck. That's the fire truck. Woo, woo, woo.
In the final trial, he independently finds and gives the therapist all 3 pictures.
All right. Give me the lettuce, the guitar, and the fire truck. I did. You did it. Good.
Drawing is another time that backwards chaining can be used to teach children to draw each component of a picture. In this example, the therapist uses backwards chaining to teach Keenan to draw a smiley face.
Draw a smiley face. What else? Good job, buddy. Reason for you. Draw a smiley face. Nice job, Keenan. Want to play with that? Draw a smiley face. Whoa, you're such a good artist. Here you go. This video is one example of a task analysis. It is important to understand that a task analysis really just involves breaking the larger skill into its smallest components. And while it is nice to sequence these things in a video for repeated use in teaching, it is not necessary. A task analysis can serve as your guide for how you will teach a broader skill, such as tying shoes or making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Or you can create a more creative display based on the component parts. Technology has really opened up the opportunities for how we approach task analysis.
Rationale. Setting a place at a table is an integral part of domestic life. This skill will allow the student to understand all items needed to eat a meal and how to arrange them. This skill can be exercised in personal life skills and also in an employment setting within any sort of eatery. Step 1. Wash hands. It is very important to wash your hands before setting the table. Step 2. Here you can see a model of a place setting that you will soon create. Step 3. Gather all needed materials to set a proper place setting. Materials needed: 1 plate, 1 glass, 1 fork, 1 spoon, 1 knife, non-sharp, 1 napkin, and 1 placemat. Step 4. Take the placemat and lay it down on the table in front of the chair. It will look like a rectangle. It will also mimic or look like the layout of the already made table setting. Step 5. Take the plate and place it on top and in the center of the placemat. Step 6. Take the paper napkin, fold it in half, and lay it vertically on the left side next to the plate. Step 7. Take the fork and place it on top of the napkin on the left side next to the plate. Ensure that the prongs of the fork face the middle of the table. Step 8. Take the knife and place it on the right side next to the plate, so that the edge of the knife faces the plate. Step 9. Take the spoon and lay it on the right side of the knife, with the spoon portion being closest to the center of the table. Step 10. Take a glass and place it above and to the right of the placemat. Step 11. With your teacher, compare and contrast your table setting with that of the modeled table setting. Congratulations on setting your first table. Now enjoy a meal with a friend.
After you have completed this learning module on intellectual disability, complete the following task analysis activity. First, you will need to describe a student, skill to be taught, setting, and any other information useful to your task analysis. Then clearly define your target behavior or skill to be taught. Next, identify any prerequisite skills that may be necessary in order for learning of the defined skill to be successful. Ask yourself, what does the student need to know? Then list any materials that will be needed for performing the behavior or skill to be taught. Finally, think about all of the necessary steps for completing the task in a sequential order. You may have to spend some time thinking about this because it can often be deceiving how far some skills actually need to be broken down. Try to be creative in the skills you choose. However, some examples could include riding the bus, getting dressed, making a phone call, zipping a coat, making a purchase, or washing dishes. Again, be creative and spend some time thinking about the smallest component parts that will need to be taught. When you have finished your task analysis activity, please post it under the assignment link in ReggieNet. You will receive credit for this activity.